Welcome back, Pauls. Let's see if there is a secret passage in the trunk. Let's go straightly into the chapter. It's chapter 10, The Midnight Watch. As soon as the two girls awoke the next morning, Nancy told Helen a plan. "I'm with you," said Helen. "Oh, I do wish we could solve the mystery of the ghost. I'm afraid that it's beginning to affect Miss Flora's health, and yet she won't leave Twill Elms. Maybe we can get Aunt Rosemary to keep her in the garden most of the day," Nancy suggested. "It's perfectly beautiful outside. We might even serve lunch under the trees." "I'm sure they would love that," said Helen. "As soon as we get down, let's propose it." Both women liked the suggestion. Aunt Rosemary has guessed their strategy was appreciative of it. "I'll wash and dry the dishes," Nancy offered when breakfast was over. "Miss Flora, why don't you and Aunt Rosemary go outside right now and take advantage of this lovely sunshine?" The fragile elderly woman smiled. There were deep circles under her eyes, indicating that she had a sleepless night. "And I'll run the vacuum cleaner around and dust this first floor in less than half an hour," Helen said merrily. Her relatives caught the spirit of their enthusiasm, and Miss Flora remarked, "I wish you girls lived here all the time. Despite our troubles, you have brought a feeling of gaiety back into our lives." Both girls smiled at the compliment. As soon as the two women had gone outdoors, the girls set to work with a will. At the end of the allotted half an hour, the first floor of the mansion was spotless. Nancy and Helen next went to the second floor, quickly made the beds, and tied up the bathrooms. "And now for the ghost," said Helen, brandishing a flashlight. Nancy took her own from a bureau drawer. "Let's see if we can figure out how to climb these attic stairs without making them creak," Nancy suggested, knowing how may come in handy sometimes. This presented a real challenge. Every inch of each step was tired before the girls finally worked out a pattern to follow in ascending the stairways noiselessly. Helen laughed. "This will certainly be a memory test, Nancy. I'll rehearse our directions. First step, but put your foot to the left near the wall. Second step, right center. Third step, against the right wall. I'll need 3 feet to do that." Nancy laughed too. "For myself, I think I'll skip the second step. Let's see. One of the fourth and fifth, it's all right to step in the center, but on the sixth you hug the left wall, on the seventh the right wall." Helen interrupted, "But if you step on the eighth and any place, it may creak. Do you skip it? 9, 10 and 11 are okay." Nancy recalled, "But from that to the 15th at the top, we are in trouble." "Let's see if I remember," said Helen. "On 12, you go left, then right again. How can you do without a jumping and losing your balance and tumbling down?" "How about skipping 14 and then stretching as far as you can to reach the top one, as the left where it doesn't squeak?" Nancy replied. "Let's go." She and Helen went back to the second floor and began what was meant to be a silent ascent. But both of them made so many mistakes at first that creaking was terrific. Finally, however, the girls had the silent spots memorized perfectly and went up noiselessly. Nancy clicked on a flashlight and swung it onto the nearest wooden paneled wall. Helen stared at it, then remarked, "This isn't made of long panels from ceiling to floor. It's built of small pieces." "That's right," said Nancy. "But see if you don't agree with me that the spot back of the costume trunk near the chimney looks a little different. The grain doesn't match the other two." The girls crossed the attic and Nancy beamed her flashlight over the suspected paneling. "It does look different," Helen said. "This could be a door, I suppose, but there's no knob or other hardware on it." She ran her fingers over a section just above the floor, following the crack at the edges of a 4 by 2.5 foot space. If it's a secret door," Nancy said. "The knob is on the other side." "How are we going to open it?" Helen questioned. "We must try prying the door open," Nancy proposed. "But first I want to test it." She taped the entire panel with her knuckles. A look of disappointment came over her face. "There's certainly no hollow space behind it," she said. "Let's make sure," said Helen. "Suppose I go downstairs and get a screwdriver and a hammer. We'll see what happens when we drive the screwdriver through this crack." "Good ideas, Helen." While she was gone, Nancy inspected the rest of the attic walls and floors. She did not find another spot which seemed suspicious. By this time, Helen has returned with the tools. Intersecting the screwdriver into one of the cracks, she began to pound onto the handle of it with a hammer. Nancy watched hopefully. The screwdriver went through the crack very easily but immediately met an obstruction on the other side. Helen pulled the screwdriver out. "Nancy, you try your luck." The young slick picked a different spot, but the results were the same. There were no open space behind the portion of the attic wall. "My hunch wasn't so good," said Nancy. Helen suggested that they might give up and go downstairs. "Anyway, I think the postman will be here soon," she smiled. I'm expecting a letter from Jim. Mother said she would forward all my mail. Nancy did not want to give up the search yet, but she nodded in agreement and waved her friend towards the stairs. Then the young detective sat down on the floor and cupped her chin in her hands. As she stared ahead, Nancy noticed that Helen, in her eagerness to meet the postman, had no bother to go quietly down the attic steps. It sounded as if Helen had picked the squeeziest spot on each step. Nancy heard Helen go out the front door and suddenly realized that she was in a big mansion all alone. That was bring the ghost on a visit, she thought. If he is around, he may think I went outside with Helen, and I may learn where the secret opening is. Nancy sat perfectly still, listening intently. Suddenly, she flung her head up. Was it her imagination, or did she hear the creak of steps? She was not mistaken. Nancy strained her ears, trying to determine from where the sounds were coming. I'm sure they're not from the attic stairs or the main staircase, and not the back stairway. Even if the ghost was in the kitchen and unlocked the door to the second door, he would know that the one of the top of the stairs was locked from the other side. Nancy's heart suddenly gave a leap. She was positive that the creaking sounds were coming from somewhere behind the attic wall. A secret staircase? She thought excitedly. Maybe the ghost is entering the second floor. Nancy waited until the sound stopped. Then she got to her feet, tiptoed noiselessly down the attic steps and looked around. She could hear nothing. Was the ghost standing quietly in one of the bedrooms? Probably Miss Flora's. Treading so lightly that she did not make a sound, Nancy peered into each room as she reached it, but no one was in any of them. Maybe he's on the first floor, Nancy thought. She descended the main stairway, hugging the wall so that she would not make a sound. Reaching the first floor, Nancy peered into the parlor. No one was there. She looked in the library, the dining room, and the kitchen. She saw no one. Well, the ghost didn't come into the house after all, Nancy concluded. He may have intended to, but changed his mind. She felt more certain that at any time, however, there was a secret entrance to Twin Elms Mansion from a hidden stairway. But how to find it? Suddenly, the young slit snapped her fingers. I know what I'll do. I'll set a trap for that ghost. She reflected that he had taken jewelry, but those steps had stopped. Apparently, he was afraid to go to the second floor. I wonder if anything is missing from the first floor, she mused. Maybe he has taken silverware or helped himself to some food. Going to the back door, Nancy opened it and called to Helen, who was now seated in the garden with Miss Flora and Aunt Rosemary. What say we start lunch, she called, not wishing to distress Miss Flora by bringing up the subject of the mystery. Okay, said Helen. In a few moments, she joined Nancy, who asked if her friend has received a letter. Helen's eyes sparkled. I sure did. Oh, Nancy, I can hardly wait for Jim to get home. Nancy smiled. The way you describe him, I can hardly wait to see him myself. Then she told Helen the real reason she has called her into the kitchen. She described the footsteps on what she was sure was a hidden creaking stairway, then added, if we discover that food or something else is missing, we'll know he's been here again. Helen offered to inspect the flat silver. I know approximately how many pieces should be in the buffet drawer, she said. And I'll look over the food supplies, Nancy suggested. I have a pretty good idea what was in the refrigerator and on the pantry shelf. It was not many minutes before each of the girls discovered articles missing. Helen said that nearly a dozen teaspoons were gone, and Nancy figured that several cans of food, some eggs, and a quart of milk has been taken. It just seems impossible to catch the thief, Helen said with a sigh. On a sudden hunch, Nancy took down from the wall a memo pad and pencil hung there. Putting a finger to her lips to indicate that Helen was no to comment, Nancy wrote on the sheet, I think the only way to catch the ghost is to trap him. I believe he has one or more microphones hidden someplace and that he hears all our plans. Nancy looked up at Helen, who nodded silently. Nancy continued to write, I don't want to worry Miss Flora or Aunt Rosemary, so let's keep our plan a secret. I suggest that we go to bed tonight as usual and carry on a conversation about our plans for tomorrow. But actually we won't take off our clothes. Then about midnight, let's tiptoe downstairs to watch. I'll wait in the kitchen. Do you want to stay in the living room? Again Helen nodded. Nancy, thinking that they had been quite too long and that if there was an eavesdropper near he might be suspicious, said aloud, what would Miss Flora and Aunt Rosemary like for lunch, Helen? Why, Helen found it harder to transfer to the new subject. They both love soup. Then I'll make a cream of chicken soup, said Nancy. Hand me a can of chicken and rice, will you? And I'll get the milk. As Helen was doing this, Nancy lighted a match, held a recently written note over the sink and set fire to the paper. Helen smiled. Nancy thinks of everything, she said to herself. The girls chatted gaily and they prepared the food and finally carried 4 trays out to the garden. They did not mention their midnight plan. The day in the garden was proving to be most beneficial to Miss Flora, and the girls were sure she would sleep well that night. Nancy's plan was followed to the letter. Just as the grandfather clock in the hall was striking midnight, Nancy arrived in the kitchen and sat down to await developments. Helen was posted in a living room chair near the hall doorway. Moonlight streamed into both rooms, but the girls had taken seats in the shadows. Helen was mentally rehearsing the further instructions which Nancy had returned to her during the afternoon. The young sleuth suggested that if Helen should see anyone, she was to run to the front door, open it, and yell "Police!" At the same time, she was to try to watch where the intruder disappeared. The minutes ticked by. There was not a sound in the house. Then suddenly, Nancy heard the front door open with a bang, and Helen's voice yelled loudly and clearly, "Police! Help! Police!" Oh my God, did Helen see an intruder? Stay tuned for the next chapter, guys. Have a happy day.